So this is where we left off last time. We created the value cards, one with the page views and the other one with the sessions. And then we also created this graph where we can pick between sessions and page views in here. And in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two other value cards, one with the session durations here, and then the other one with the bounce rate. And then at the end, we're going to modularize the entire bootstrap row with all the value cards in here. So what I did last time, I just forgot to make the color reactive, basically, depending on the data frame that we're feeding into here. It's going to be either red or green, so it's not static anymore. And then I also put some CSS on the icon, so its positioning looks a little bit better. So what we basically have to do first is I'm going to create a function with the session durations. So for this one, we're reading in web data. And we can look at it. We have to pick the session duration column, which is this one. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to average the session duration for each day, and then we can display this in a scatter plot. So if I go back to this one, we can create a function called session duration. This function has a data frame argument, and then in here we'll start with web data. We'll group by the date, and then we'll summarize the session duration. So we'll say session underscore duration is equal to average session duration, and then going to ungroup the data. So we're just going to load these libraries and then run this again. So this is the output that we're going to get. So we'll save this in temp, and then we can go into the view sessions R file, and from here we can copy paste all of this code, because what we're doing now is very similar to what we did in the views and sessions function. So we can copy paste this, and then we're arranging it in descending order again. And then when we later use the API and read in the data, today's date is not fully baked yet, so we don't have 24 hours worth of data. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the second row, which is going to be this one. We're going to do with slice, and then because there are only two columns, third column is not here, we're only grabbing the second column, and then we enlist it. So in here we get a named vector. The name is going to be session duration, and then the value is the mean value. So then in here we'll do the same thing. We're going to grab the second and the third row to make a comparison. But now, instead of using mutate add, we can just use the mutate function. And then we'll say session duration equals, and then instead of the dot placeholder, which represented the individual columns for the views and session function, we'll just substitute this one with the actual column name, in this case session duration. Then we're going to grab the first row and the second column, then we pivot longer, and then in here we have only one icon for session duration. We'll just say the clock one, then arrow, color, and value is the same, and then for the name we'll say session duration. So if we run this and then see what we get, so we have the session duration, the value, percentage increase or percentage decrease, the actual value of the previous day, the icon, and then depending it was a percentage increase or decrease, arrow up or down, and the color red or green. So next, we're using the temporary data set, and then we'll use Plotly to just make a line graph. So the first argument is going to be the data frame, then the second one is the x-axis, which is the date, and then the y-axis is session duration. Then we'll say Plotly and then make it a line graph. And then what we also want to do, we want to get rid of the axis titles. So we're going to say layout, and then in here we'll have x-axis, then list, and the title is equal to an empty string. And then we'll do the same for the y-axis. So if we run this, that's the plot we're getting, and then we just save this in plot. And then next, we're returning a list similar to the views and sessions function, and then here we'll say session duration plot is equal to plot, and then session duration cards is equal to value cards df. So I'm going to exchange web data with df. So if we run this function, we're going to get a list back, one with the plot and then the other one with the value cards tibble. So now we're going to do the same thing with the bounce rate. So I'll save this first in the R folder as session underscore duration. And then we'll make another R script where we copy paste what we had, and then instead of session duration, we'll do bounce rate. And then we'll substitute the session duration column name with the bounce rate column name. Going to do this in the mutate as well. Then the icon is going to be different. So in here, well, we can use the exclamation circle icon. And then instead of session duration, we'll say bounce rate. So for the bounce rate, what we need to do is so the metric for bounce rate is the lower the bounce rate, the better the metric is. So instead of saying if the value is less than 0, the arrow is going to be down, we're going to say so if the value is greater than 0, so if there was an increase in the bounce rate, which is actually not what we want, then the arrow is pointing down, and then if the bounce rate is greater than 0, then it's going to be a red icon. Otherwise, it's going to be a green color and a red color for the arrow icon and the value as well. So in here, the y-axis is going to be the bounce rate as well. And then instead of session duration, we'll just say bounce rate. And then we can run this function as well with web data. And now we have the bounce rate. So there was a 14% increase in the bounce rate. The actual value of the last 24, or not the last 24, but the previous day, where we have 24 hours worth of data, was 83%. And then we have a downwards arrow because we have an increase and a red color. So we'll save this one as bounce rate. And then what we can do now, we can go back into the app.r file. And we need to go here in the render UI. So if we're running the views and sessions function, so this is what we get back, a table with the page views and the sessions for the rows. And what we want to do next is we want to use the bind rows function. And then what we do is we'll say bounce rate web data. And if we run this, we want to grab the bounce rate cards table. And yeah, before this, I want to have the session duration card. And then I want to grab this value or this table as well from the list. Put a comma in here. And this is the output that we're getting. We're getting a table with 4 rows. Each row represents a value card, page views, sessions, session duration, and then the bounce rate. So if I save this and then run the app, we have four value cards now. So what we have to do next is we have to round the actual values in here. And also I don't like the order of the value cards. So I want page views first, then sessions, then the session duration and the bounce rate. So basically I want it to be like they appear here in the data frame. So what's happening right now in here in this function, it splits this entire data frame by name. So what we need to do is we need to make it's a character right now, but the name column we have to make it a factor, and then we're going to order the levels, and depending on the order of the levels, that's how the data frame gets split by, and that's then how the value cards appear in the application as well. So afterwards I'm going to use mutate, and then in here I'll say name is equal to factor name, and then the levels are going to be equal to name. So they're already ordered in here for the right order. So if we run the app again, we'll see that the value cards are now in order. So now I have to go back in here, and then I have to round the actual. So I'll just say we don't have to round it to any decimal places, so I'll just say round without a digit. And this is basically what we're getting. And actually for the bounce rate I can change the direction, so I can still point upwards because the bounce rate actually has increased, but we'll leave it in the red color because it's negative when the bounce rate increases. So in here I'll just leave this, and then what I also want to do for the actuals, I want to say paste, Then I want actuals, and then I want to put a percentage sign in here because it goes from 0 to 100 for the bounce rate. And then for the sessions, what I want to do is I want to just to make it clearer what it is. Yeah, I'm just going to put seconds afterwards. Here for the bounce rate, I'm going to use paste 0. And I forgot a comma. So I'll run this again. I'll run the session duration as well. Then I go into the app. And now if I run this one, I'll get an error when I want to bind the rows together. So there's one actuals that's a double, and the other one is a character. So if I want to bind this, I think this one works. And here the actuals is a character, whereas for the sessions and the views function, the actuals is a double. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to say dplyr, and then I'll mutate the actuals into as.character actuals, and then I'll see if it works. So now this works, so I'll run it. And now we have the page views, the sessions, the session duration with 89 seconds for that particular day, and the bounce rate was 83% with an increase of 14% when we compare the days. So what I want to do next is I want to modularize the render UI and then also the UI output. So what I'm going to do is I'll have an R script here, and then similar to the sidebar module, we need a UI with the namespace and then also a server function. So in here, what I can say value cards UI is function, and then in here we have an ID, and then afterwards, similar to the sidebar, we have the namespace is equal to shiny, and then the namespace function and the ID. And then in here, I'll just say shiny tag list, and in this tag list, I have this shiny UI output in here with the value cards, and I have to wrap the value cards output ID inside the namespace. So that was everything for the UI. Now for the server, I have value cards server, where I have the function. So in here, similar to sidebar again, we have the ID argument, and then we also have a data frame argument. So we all have ID and then data frame. Module server ID, then in here we'll have function input and the output, and inside that function I'm going to put the render UI. So all of this is going into here. And then I'll leave web data for now, but later on we're going to substitute this with the actual data frame, and the value cards don't return anything, so we don't have to have a return statement for this particular module. So I'll save this in here and I'll say value cards module. I save this, and then here in the app.r file in the UI we have value cards, and then the ID is going to be value cards, and then here for the server I have value cards server. The ID is going to be the same, so ID is value cards, and then let's say df is web_data. So I can save this, and for the module now I can substitute the df, the web data with the data frame. Now I can save this here. I can go into the server function again, and I think that should be it, but let's see if we get an error if we run it. So if we run it, we'll get an error. So, and the error is value card server object shiny not found. Seems to happen in the server. Let's see what happened here. I only have one semicolon, I need two. So save this, and then let's see if this works. Okay, this worked now. So now we have the 4 value cards, we modularized it, and yeah, we created the session duration value card and also the bounce rate. And again, this video can be found on my blog, thatdata.com, and the link is in the description below.